Tonight, Quebec Liberals have declared war against New Brunswick in the West. Well, we're taking the fight to their turf. It's January 26th, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government for why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
Last week, we told you about the Liberal mayor of Montreal, Denis Coderre, declaring war against Western Canada and its oil and gas industry. Coderre, the top Liberal organizer in Quebec, held a press conference to attack the proposed Energy East pipeline, a $15.7 billion construction project that would bring Western Canadian ethical oil to Quebec and New Brunswick to displace the OPEC conflict oil their refineries currently import. Coderre couldn't have been clearer. He wants to block the pipeline. Well, this led to an uproar in Western Canada, where low oil prices have already hurt the oil industry, and left-wing extremists have bogged down other pipeline proposals that the industry sorely needs. And of course, there's New Brunswick, whose legislature voted unanimously in favor of this pipeline. They really need the pipeline too. And then there's the $15.7 billion in construction jobs. But this wasn't just an economic attack that Coderre made. It was an attack on national unity. He even started writing little insults on Twitter, mocking Saskatchewan, saying it was too small to count in Confederation, and how Saskatchewan should should say thank you to Quebec. Well, this morning, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with Denis Coderre. But as I predicted last week, Trudeau is afraid to touch Coderre. Coderre is by far the most powerful Liberal in Quebec. He could cause real trouble for Trudeau if he wanted to. So instead of making Coderre walk back his comments, let alone apologize, Trudeau was submissive. He didn't say that pipelines were a matter of federal jurisdiction, that they weren't the mayor's business. He didn't rebuke Coderre's insults to Saskatchewan. Trudeau just served up the same blather about process and environment and blah, blah, blah. Here, listen to a full minute of this. Can you discern what he's actually saying here?
There are, as you highlight, risks associated with transporting energy resources. And the process that the federal government is now putting forward, or is shortly putting forward, will be focused on demonstrating that those risks have been addressed adequately by industry in order to reassure Canadians, municipalities, First Nations and Indigenous communities, as well as the scientific community, that concerns such as those are being adequately addressed. Canadians know that you can't build a strong economy without protecting the environment at the same time.
So does Trudeau support the pipeline or not? He didn't say. Does he approve of Coderre's opposition to it? He didn't say. Does he approve of Coderre insulting Saskatchewan? He didn't say. Of course not, because he's a Quebec Liberal too. Do you think Trudeau loves Western Canada and their oil? Yeah, about as much as his father, Pierre Trudeau, did. But at least Pierre Trudeau had the courage to tell Western Canada what he really thought of them. Trudeau just had a meeting with Montreal's big bully, and instead of standing up for all of Canada, for the idea of a confederation where all provinces count and work together and respect the Constitution, Trudeau just threw Alberta and Saskatchewan and New Brunswick under the bus. But Trudeau actually did say something new, and it's a poison pill that could assure that the pipeline never gets built. He said that it's not just the pipeline that's on trial for safety. The entire oil sands itself will now be judged by UN-style global warming standards. Here, listen.
We will ensure that in the process going forward, we take into account all greenhouse gas emissions, including those upstream.
Oh, so let me get this straight. The pipeline could be perfectly safe and environmentally friendly, but it could still be blocked if the Liberals don't like the oil sands itself. This new standard judging the provenance of the oil isn't applied to any other source of oil coming into Quebec, including OPEC oil. Trudeau doesn't make Saudi Arabia or Algeria or other OPEC countries answer for their carbon footprint, let alone their ethics, before it's allowed to come into the Belle Province. But only Alberta will have to do that. It would be like telling a railway line, your train tracks are perfectly safe, but we're going to block you because we don't like some of the things you're importing on the train. Trudeau just slipped the dagger in. It's done. Here, listen to Trudeau's senior policy advisor, Gerald Butts, a few years ago when he was the boss of the Anti-Oil World Wildlife Fund, talking about oil and pipelines.
We don't think it's up to us to decide whether there should be another route for a pipeline, because the real alternative is not an alternative route, it's an alternative economy.
So the whole National Energy Board hearings are going to be a sham. There's no route they will accept. There's no safety standards they will accept. They simply don't accept oil if it's from the oil sands. It's rigged. But Denis Coderre and the Liberals don't care. They don't need this pipeline because they already get all the oil money they want through equalization payments, including billions from oil-producing provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan. This year, Quebec will sop up $21 billion in equalization money. Coderre says he hates Alberta and Saskatchewan oil, but he sure loves taking the profits from it, doesn't he? Well, we're fighting back. If Quebec Liberals don't want anything to do with Western oil, fine. Then cut them off. They want to cut off the West from markets by blocking pipelines? Fine. Then let's cut them off too. Coderre is like the spoiled teenager who fights with his parents but then demands the keys to the family car to go out. Oh, and could you spot me $20, Dad? Yeah, no more, you little brat. Cut them off. Cut off the equalization payments. What Coderre is threatening is not even constitutional, by the way. Imagine a country where every mayor along, say, the CP Railway or the Trans-Canada Highway could simply set up a little drawbridge or toll booth. Our Constitution, Section 91, specifically says that's only the jurisdiction of Parliament, not every little liberal hack like Coderre along the way. Imagine if other provinces blocked Quebec's exports passing through Ontario and the West by train or truck and claimed it was because we were just checking its carbon footprint. No, that's illegal. But Justin Trudeau and his wrecking crew don't care. And neither does Rachel Notley, the NDP destroyer who's running Alberta into the ground. She's against pipelines too. Like Coderre, though, she wants the oil money. Notley has announced a new carbon tax, and Trudeau says he'll be doing the same too. But building pipelines so the industry can survive, well, yeah, that's someone else's problem. We've got to cut off these thieving politicians. We've got to demand that the equalization formula in Canada be changed. If you're a politician who hates oil, you shouldn't get any oil equalization payments. Pretty simple. I think they can even understand that in French. And in fact, we're setting up a new website in the French language, riendeplu.ca. It means no more. Cut them off. We're taking out a billboard in French in downtown Montreal saying, rien de plus. If you don't want Western oil, fine. You don't get Western oil money. Pretty simple. You see, I bet a lot of Montrealers actually just don't know how much free money they get from the West because slick politicians like Coderre would never tell them. He'd never tell them the facts, that he's really just a grifter who only gets to make his spending sprees courtesy of Western oil workers. And he'd never tell Montrealers the risks of antagonizing the West, and that maybe, if he continues with his attacks, we might cut him off. We hope to have our first billboard up in Montreal in the next few weeks. We've already launched a French language website, riendeplu.ca, which means no more, letting Quebecers know how reckless Coderre is and how he risks not only damaging national unity and the West's economy, but he's going to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs for Quebec too. Who do you think pays for those $10 a day subsidized Quebec daycare places? Who do you think pays for Quebec's low tuition universities and luxurious mega hospitals? No oil means no oil money. Quebec voters ought to know that. This is a public service. Look, who's going to tell them? Coderre? Justin Trudeau? Rachel Notley? No, we have to. We're also running radio ads in Alberta and Saskatchewan to let the West know what's really going on, what's being done to them. That Justin Trudeau and Rachel Notley were lying when they said, if you just raise taxes and bring in a carbon tax, the world will accept your oil and pipelines. Well, of course the world wants our oil. New Brunswick refineries want our oil, but it's Liberal politicians who block it. So starting next week, we're going to be running radio ads in Saskatchewan and Alberta, letting voters know what's going on and asking for help to help cover the costs of our Montreal billboards. We'll start with one billboard, and if we get enough funds, we'll put up more around Montreal and Quebec City, just reminding Quebecers that there's only so much abuse the West will take from those liberal ingrates. We're also commissioning a public opinion poll to gauge popular support for cutting off equalization payments to Quebec Liberals. Look, I'm not blaming all Quebecers. I know a lot of Quebecers love the West, and thousands of Quebecers even work in the oil sands and in fracking in Alberta and Saskatchewan. I'm blaming Quebec Liberals like Denis Coderre and his enabler, Justin Trudeau. I'm blaming Rachel Notley and Ontario's Kathleen Wynne. I'm blaming everyone who slaps Canadian oil and gas workers in the face and then reaches into their pockets for taxes. Are you as mad about this as I am? If so, visit cutthemoff.ca. You can see our Montreal billboard and listen to our Alberta and Saskatchewan radio ads and help chip in to cover the cost of them and our poll too, if you like. The only national leader who's fighting for us here is Brad Wall, the Premier of Saskatchewan. We need to have his back to do things that he can't do, like the radio ads, the billboards, and a massive campaign. Look, if we don't, who will? Justin Trudeau? Rachel Notley? So visit cutthemoff.ca and help us with our campaign to buy billboards, radio ads, and a poll. It's up to us. Stay with us for more on this subject.
Anyone who thinks this is only an Alberta problem is sadly mistaken. Hear, hear. And now the Mayor of Montreal has come out opposing Energy East. Where was the Prime Minister? He was in Davos being starstruck by Hollywood actors. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister won't show leadership, will one Liberal member of Parliament from Alberta, one of the four, stand up for Western Canadian jobs?
That's Candice Bergen, a Conservative MP. But it's not just Western Canada. Of course, the province of New Brunswick desperately wants the Energy East pipeline. They want to displace expensive foreign conflict oil from OPEC countries with less expensive ethical oil from Alberta. And then there's the detail of $15.7 billion worth of construction. I'm frustrated because this reminds me of the Quebec Liberal war against the oil patch under Pierre Trudeau. And I think a lot of Westerners are getting those old bad feelings again. That's why we set up the website Rien de Plus, to say to Quebec Liberals, you can't have it both ways. You can't keep taking oil transfer payments while blocking oil pipelines. But listen, I know that not all Quebecers share this anti-oil, anti-industry, anti-Western mentality. And joining me now from Quebec is my good friend Eric Duhaime, the radio host of FM 93. Eric, it's so important that I talk to you regularly because I just see the news of Justin Trudeau and Denis Coderre and Equiterre, which is basically the David Suzuki Foundation of Quebec. And it's easy for me to think all Quebecers hate industry. But you've got some news today that there are little signs of hope in Quebec. Tell me the hopeful signs.
Well, first off, today, the mayor of Quebec City and the mayor of Lévis on the South Shore here of Quebec City, they both came out in favor of the pipeline. The Coalition for the Future of Quebec, with François Legault as the leader, the third party at the National Assembly, came out in favor of the pipeline of Energy East as well. And they're even saying, they're going further, they even say that they understand what Brad Wall is saying. So it's not all Quebecers. It's a Montreal thing. As you know, sometimes the big metropolis, they have a very different political atmosphere, but it's not all of Quebec. Many people in Quebec are outraged almost as much as you are out west. We understand that Quebecers are receiving a lot in terms of equalization payment. We understand that we have our own form of energy here with hydroelectricity, and if one single person from Alberta or Saskatchewan or BC or even Ontario was coming in Quebec telling us that we shouldn't send our energy here or there, or export here or there, or have new rules, or tell us that we cannot have carry it on their territory, we would be the first ones to be outraged. So it is very important to understand that not all Quebecers, it's a few politicians from Montreal currently that are talking against the pipeline, but many people here in Quebec City are in favor. And actually, it's interesting because Quebec City is the place where it's the most critical, because it's here where the pipeline will cross over the St. Lawrence River. So in terms of environmental risks, it's much more the population of Quebec City that should be worried than the population of Montreal. And on top of that, I have to underline for those who don't know yet that the mayor of Montreal a few weeks ago came out and sent 8 billion liters of suing of the Montreal shit, as we call it, the flush gate in the St. Lawrence River. So he was not really concerned about the environment at that time, but when it's a matter of a safe pipeline that is crossing over the St. Lawrence River, he's freaking out. So it's very funny to see the former Liberal minister, Denis Coderre, screaming today and trying to be Mr. Green, while a few days ago he was the flush gate man.
The flush gate man, that's right. Now, here's the thing. I don't want to be... I don't want to have my buttons pushed against all of Quebec by, as you point out, a Liberal mayor in Montreal who, was a federal cabinet minister with the Liberals, and he's playing his games. I want to hang on to my hope that people in Quebec City and Lévis and the third party, the Coalition d'Avenir de Québec, are sensible, and they don't want to wreck Confederation. Here's a theory I have, and I'm hanging on to this with my fingernails, Eric, is that the news in Quebec, I don't follow it closely, but all the news I read in Quebec about the oil sands and pipelines is so totally negative that I think it's possible that you can be an open-minded, good person in Montreal and have never heard the case for the oil sands ever. And you might also think, as Denis Coderre tweeted the other day, let me show you a tweet that he said. Tweeting back to Brad Wall, he actually said Quebec helps finance the projects that in Saskatchewan, and that Quebec helps Saskatchewan. And look at that, dit merci. So Denis Coderre is actually saying to Saskatchewan, you should be grateful for us. You should say thank you to us. Here's my theory, Eric, that there's hundreds of thousands of Montrealers who probably think that the oil sands are terribly dangerous, probably think that Quebec subsidizes the West, because they've never heard otherwise. What do you think of that theory?
No, you're absolutely right, Ezra. And actually, the mayor of Quebec City even went further today. He said that TransCanada has to do the job much better to inform the population, answer the questions of the people, because there is a miscommunication problem. You're absolutely right. And part of the effort will also need to come from the oil industry. I mean, they need to be on the ground. They need to inform people. They need to get beyond Radio-Canada, this French CBC, and beyond the environmentalist group and talk directly to the population and escape those biased media. So I hope they're going to do it in the very near future, because otherwise they're going to be in big trouble if they let Denis Coderre define their project, and that is what is at risk right now.
Yeah. Well, we're putting up a billboard called Rien de plus. And it's not saying we want to separate or we don't like Quebec. It's saying, hey, you can't have it both ways. No more of this. You cannot. And part of it is to say to Montrealers, you have been misled by your own mayor. We want to push back. We were launching the French language website, riendeplus.ca, the French language billboard that we're putting up in Montreal, just to sort of jolt Montrealers and saying Denis Coderre is not leading you in the right direction. Eric Duhaime, last word to you. I want to stay hopeful. I want to believe that we can keep the national unity. We can build this national project that's as important in some ways as the Trans-Canada Highway, and that, look, Quebecers will get plenty of jobs building this pipeline. There's plenty of Quebecers who work in the oil sands. Last word to you, Eric. Make me feel more optimistic than I do.
Well, the last word is going to come to believe it or not, it's Justin Trudeau at the end of the day who has to call the shots, because he has been elected Prime Minister of this country only a few months ago. And ultimately, he's the one who's going to have to decide, because this needs some national leadership. And if the Prime Minister of Canada is not able to stand up for Western Canadians and for our economy and our rights, then we're in trouble. This morning, Denis Coderre met with Justin Trudeau. He had nothing concrete and nothing sensible to say at the end of the meeting, but hopefully in the next few days, people from Western Canada are going to make sure that their Prime Minister is also talking on their behalf, because for now he's been quite silent.
Yeah. Eric Duhaime, great to talk with you as always. Thank you for giving me a refreshing view from Quebec and helping me to keep a little flickering flame of hope alive. It's great to see you again, my friend. Look forward to talking to you as the story unfolds. Right on. Folks, stay with us. After the break, Joe Oliver is back. You'll want to hear what he has to say. Stay with us.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know the Rebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to therebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back. Well, there were a lot of issues that did dominate the 2015 federal election, but one issue that was on very few people's minds, and certainly not articulated clearly in any party policy book, was that of electoral reform. And what I mean by that was changing the way we choose our government, a pretty fundamental change, almost constitutional in nature. Well, after the Liberals got elected with 39% of the vote, they announced that they felt that was a mandate to significantly change the way we choose the government. No longer the highest vote wins, but a complicated system of ranking where you number your first and second and third choice, something that is alien to our Canadian tradition and has no base of support, and yet the Liberals refuse to put it to a referendum. Is this undemocratic? Is this important? What will this mean? We're joined now by a former cabinet minister in the Conservative government, Joe Oliver. Great to see you again, Joe.
Great to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. And you have written recently in the Sun newspapers that this is of such importance, it's almost like a constitutional amendment. Why would you say that changing the way we vote is so important?
Well, it seems to me that the way we decide to elect our members of parliament goes really to the heart of democracy. And we've had this system in place since Confederation. Candidate with the most votes wins. That's called first past the post. It's used by about 45 countries, including the United States, the most powerful country in the world, the UK, the home of democracy, and India, the largest democracy in the world. So this is a proven system which has created governments that have political legitimacy. The Prime Minister is now saying that no, from now on, we won't be using that way to elect our members of parliament. It's going to be something different. He hasn't articulated what that will be. It certainly wasn't discussed during the election, but he proposes to appoint a group of wise people who will provide some advice, and then he will decide how Canadians are going to elect their members of parliament without asking Canadians their permission to make that absolutely fundamental change.
You know, this sounds so much like self-dealing. It's like when a politician votes to raise his own pay. The one change that some governments do is you don't vote on your own page, you vote and it takes the effect the next government, so people don't have that moral hazard. There's a tremendous moral hazard when you're in power before the next election to change the rules of the next election. Obviously, whether it's conscious or not, you're going to be tinkering and changing things to give you the best advantage there is. I mean, it's so obvious that if you're in power and you're changing the rules that would get you out, that there's a moral hazard there that you're rigging it.
Well, this is precisely the concern, and that's why I believe when the public gets onto this issue, watch out, because I don't think they will find it tolerable for the Liberals to rig the system in their favor forever. And I think the press, which has already started talking about this issue finds it quite objectionable indeed, because the press doesn't want to see a political party manipulate the system in their favor. So this is pretty outrageous and of a scheme, and I think that it could blow up in the Prime Minister's face if he pushes ahead without getting the consent of the people.
You know, I remember when the Conservatives made their changes to the Elections Act, they were tinkering. It was, well, you need these pieces of ID instead of those pieces, and voting, there's extra vote. Like, they were tinkering around the edges, ways that would not affect 99% of people, and it didn't go to the heart of how you vote and how they're counted. What's dangerous here is he doesn't even know what he's doing, and yet the one thing he knows is he's not going to check with us. Joe, did you know that we did a national opinion poll by the firm Torch? We surveyed a statistically valid sample of Canadians. The results were 73% of Canadians said they insist that they have the right to vote on these changes in a referendum. What else came out from this poll is that Canadians said this was not on their mind. In the federal election last October, they didn't feel the government has a mandate. But let me put this to you. Justin Trudeau's got a lot of political capital. Could there be anything better for him to spend it on than giving himself perpetual re-elections?
I'm amazed that he's willing to sacrifice all the political capital that he's earned from his sunny ways and from his recent election. We're right into a major honeymoon, but it can change on a dime. If the people think that the government in power is going to try to rig the system in their favor, I don't think they would find that tolerable. And I think he's playing with fire. And I'm quite surprised it might be tempting for his political operatives to want to get away with this audacious scheme, but I think he's playing with fire if he thinks that the Canadian people will find it acceptable. Frankly, I believe that the 73% will go up when people understand what this is all about. During the campaign, I talked to some of my constituents whether they'd heard about it, and almost no one had. And even if it had been discussed a bit, which it really hadn't been, no one discussed the actual change, and frankly, we still don't know what he has in mind.
Yeah. You know, it will bring back all the bad memories that people have perhaps forgotten about the Liberal Party in the bad old days. Insider, back scratching, I'll take care of you, you take care of me, blurring the lines between what's in Canada's interests versus what's in the Liberal Party's interest. If Justin Trudeau tries to do this, I believe it will remind Canadians of what they wanted to get away from the party of ad scam. Trouble is, it's too late to redo that last election here. I mean, I think Justin Trudeau has such so much wind in his sails, in a honeymoon, the momentum, that he might try and spend it on this the same way when Barack Obama first came in. He didn't have a mandate for Obamacare. That wasn't an election issue in 2008, but he had the seats, he had the will, boom. He spent a lot of his capital on that signature thing. That terrifies me because a lot of those Obama advisors are now Trudeau advisors. Last word to you, Joe.
Well, look, there's a real danger that he'll sully the reputation, the brand, the Liberal brand, for a long time. But if he actually gets away with it, there's a deeper concern, and that is it could undermine public confidence in our electoral system going forward. And that's bad for democracy.
And I don't think our judges would push back. I think our judges are so in the tank. The judges that would nix a Stephen Harper appointee to the Supreme Court, judges that threw out so much Harper legislation, I believe our judiciary has become so partisan that they might let this one pass. Maybe, I hope I'm wrong. What do you think? Do you think judges would regard this law as tantamount to a constitutional change that needs more than just a simple majority in Parliament?
I don't know that it requires a constitutional change. That's the
I hope the Senate, I hope the Conservative Senate would try and stop it.
Well, frankly, I hope the people will stop it.
Yeah, that's the right answer. Joe, great to see you again. Okay. Thanks very much for joining us today. Stay with us, so much more after these short messages.
I love Alberta. I've lived here my whole life and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our free market, pro-business, low-tax, do-it-yourself attitude. And now, I'm watching my province get destroyed. We've all had hints of the NDP's radical views in the past, but no one actually thought they'd ever run this province. Not even them. And now they are. And the worst is yet to come. I give my sad forecast for Alberta in my new ebook, The Destroyers, Rachel Notley and the NDP's War on Alberta. Go to thedestroyers.ca to sign up for your free copy today.
Hey, welcome back. My favorite part of the show, your viewer feedback. Climate Fallacy writes about last night's interview with Mark Morano. Awesome show, Ezra, and it's great to see you have a sound and non-biased mind to realize that the global warming movement is simply a hoax. Hey, thanks for the note. Look, the climate changes, always has, always will. Ice ages have come and gone long before mankind figured out how to make cars. Did you know that Canada's far north Arctic islands used to be covered in massive forests? The trees are now petrified, covered in ice and snow. That's how warm the world used to be in the past. We're still in a bit of an ice age, of course, as my friend Patrick Moore points out, in a very simple statement of the obvious. All life on Earth prefers warmth to cold. The largest cities in the world are near the equator, not near the two poles. People love living in warm climates, so do all other species. There are far more of all types of life, animal and plant. Where it's warm, where do we get this idea that warmth is bad? And people who say that are even Canadian? Acuna writes about my monologue last night about Trudeau and says, Justin is not to blame for Justin. He is just an egotistical idiot with a gold card. I put this right on the tax-paying idiots that voted him in. They are your real enemy. Well, of course, there is no requirement to be a taxpayer to vote. As Mitt Romney said so accurately in the 2008 U.S. presidential election, 47% of Americans are takers, only 53% are makers by some measures. By 47%, he meant people who don't work at all, people on welfare, people who benefit from the government through grants or public sector jobs. So for a conservative to win, he's got to get 51% out of 53% of makers. That's getting tougher all the time. I don't know what the breakdown is in Canada, but look at all the people Trudeau's campaign platform strategically bought off. Public sector unions with promises of big spending binges. Aboriginal chiefs by promising to end financial disclosure of their politicians. The CBC with a $150 million specific promise. Lawyers who can now sue in court challenges program. Teachers, social workers, everyone who benefits from big government. I don't doubt that some makers, some taxpayers also voted for Trudeau, but frankly, like Barack Obama's close win in 2008, Trudeau didn't need them. Dan writes, this is the most tasteless and ugliest bull S-H-I-T I ever seen. Rebel media, give the world a break and wake up, scum. Hi, Dan, you could literally be talking about any of our videos by me or anyone else on the network. I have no idea what you're talking about, but even without knowing what you're talking about, I'm pretty sure you're wrong, because if you were right, you might have made an argument or challenged a fact, but you didn't. You name-called, which is what the left does. Well, it's what part of the left does. The other part of the left doesn't even name-call anymore. They just try to get you censored. Stephen Britton writes on Facebook about Sheila Gunn Reid's commentary about a satirical infomercial that Sophie Trudeau made back when she was a journalist that is just so gross, I don't even want to describe the video to you. I'll just say it's about drinking bodily fluids, and it is not funny. Well, here's what Steve wrote about Sheila's commentary. Quote, this is sleazy and classless. Justin Trudeau is fair game, but it is cyberbullying when you dig up something that's 14 years old and go after his wife, who is a private citizen, with it. You should pull this down and apologize because, frankly, you're far better than this. Well, Steve, I think you're wrong in several ways. First of all, this was not a private video that I dug up. This is a public video, professionally produced, aired on Quebec TV. This wasn't some confidential home movie meant to be seen by friends. She made this professionally as an actress, and it was aired to millions of people. It's still online, obviously. Second, Sophie Trudeau is not a private person. In some respects, she is, of course. Even public people have private lives, but the Trudeaus have politicized much of their private lives. For example, they have forced us to pay for their 2 nannies. They have shown us boudoir-style photos of them being intimate, published in Vogue magazine. I don't propose to talk about personal parts of their lives, but if Sophie Trudeau makes her singing and acting and yoga theories and crystals and all that weird stuff public in speeches and interviews, how can it then suddenly be treated as private when I criticize it, as opposed to other people in the media complimenting her on it? Third, do you think for a moment that if Laureen Harper, as a grown woman, had made a video so absolutely gross and classless, and to many people immoral or at least disrespectful as this, do you think the media wouldn't be doing panel discussions on it and documentaries on it and polls on it? Finally, don't use that word cyberbullying on me. That's the last refuge of people trying to get critics to shut up, which I will not do. We're pretty much the only media in the country that actively criticizes this Liberal government. The CBC is in love. The Globe and Mail and Toronto Star run Liberal press releases as news. Parts of most media are good, but they're pretty much shutting their company down. Talk radio has been castrated by senior management. There are no conservative talk show hosts anymore with national shows. So yeah, I'll let everyone else tell Sophie Trudeau how wonderful her video about drinking her own menstrual fluid was. We'll publish a fair criticism of it by Sheila Gunn Reid saying, "Sorry, lady, you're gross." Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy class. We have the grossest first lady in the world. When Sophie Trudeau stops lecturing me and hectoring me and campaigning at me for the Liberals, she'll be a private person again, and we will all happily ignore her and her gross-out videos. And I can tell you, Steve, I look forward to that day. Hey, folks, that's our show. I hope you like it. If you haven't had a chance yet, check out our revamped website, www.cutthemoff.ca. It has an image of our new French language billboard that's going up in Montreal, as well as our English radio ads running in the West. And it has a link to our new all-French website, Rien de plus, which means no more. Our stern message to Justin Trudeau, Denis Coderre, and other Quebec Liberals who hate Western Canadian oil but love Western Canadian oil money. Yeah, no, rien de plus, cutthemoff.ca. From all of us here at The Rebel, good night, and keep fighting for freedom.